This is the 10-Minute Teacher Podcast with your host, Vicki Davis.
Today's sponsor is Clixo. Clixo is an amazing magnetic steam toy that I recommend for classrooms and kids everywhere. Stay tuned at the end of the show to learn more about Clixo, or check them out at clixo.com/pages/target. Dr. Catlin Tucker is a best-selling author with over 24 years of experience in K-12. She's known for her work in blended learning, universal design for learning, UDL, and student-led instructional strategies. Relating this to AI in her new book, Elevating Educational Design with AI, Making Learning Accessible, Inclusive, and Equitable, published in January 2025 with co-author Katie Novak. She also has a new book. It's called The Station Rotation Model in UDL, Elevate Tier 1 Instruction. You've got a lot of irons in the fire, don't you?
Really love to write. It is definitely how I process what I'm learning and what I'm doing.
There's a lot going on with using artificial intelligence, but not all uses are great. There's been some recent research out of the University of Pennsylvania, University of Michigan, and they had a paper entitled Pedagogical Biases in AI-Powered Educational Tools, the Case of Lesson Plan Generators. And they looked at 90 lesson plans, and they found that those tools weren't really measuring up. Your book takes a different approach to this. So what are your thoughts on this research, and how should educators be using AI for lesson planning?
That book, actually, the concept really blossomed out of my concern about the conversations happening around AI use on social media. So I would be on Instagram and you'd see teachers getting so excited, like, look at this tool. I can copy and paste a standard in or a learning objective and it spits out a lesson, or it spits out an entire unit. And I thought, ooh, I'm not comfortable with this. It's not spitting out a new and improved lesson. It's spitting out the same one-size-fits-all teacher-led experiences that educators have been using forever, and I would argue to not great results if we look at levels of teacher burnout and student disengagement. And so for me, when I was thinking about how do I position the work I've done in relation to AI, and I think when I talk to educators about reimagining the ways in which they design and facilitate learning, time to design with a high level of intentionality has always been a bit of a barrier to entry, right? Because we're so spread thin. And in that book, I really wanted to help educators understand how to partner with AI to design at a much higher level, putting the fundamental kind of principles of backward design, universal design for learning into practice in a way that feels sustainable and allows us to better meet the beautiful diversity of learners in our classrooms.
Are you an advocate of kind of learning to prompt it yourself?
I know there's a lot of tools that spit out the lessons for teachers. And if that's your starting point, fine. What a lot of the AI tools are not great at yet is spitting out lessons that are differentiated, student-centered, allow students to lead aspects of the learning experience. And that's not to say AI can't help us do those things. But if you generate a lesson from an AI-powered education tool, then you almost always have to go into an AI chatbot, whichever one you choose. Then you have to know how to prompt it so that you are creating a lesson that is differentiated, that offers students agency and meaningful choices, that really allows them to engage in learning in lots of different modalities. That's possible, but teachers do need to kind of play with AI chatbots, learn the prompting, to your point, to be able to create those more dynamic, forward-thinking lessons.
And I like to create projects for each class trained on standards. And a project is kind of like a little piece of training data that's, trained on my class, the methods I like to teach, and some of my best lesson plans. Because the other thing is, a lot of these tools that are out there that, like you said, a lot of people love, they don't give you access to the most recent models and the newest models. Peter Diamandis, in his book, The Future is Faster Than He Thinks, says that pretty much 10 years will have 100 years of change. So when the teachers come to you and you have a heart for teachers, the teacher burnout, the teacher frustration, looking at the UDL framework and training ChatGPT or Claude or whichever tool I'm using on that framework is a pathway to more engaging lessons. But what's your message to the teacher who's just beginning? This AI stuff is just going over their head and they don't know where to start.
I totally empathize with educators who are feeling like this is so much to keep up with. My message almost always, doesn't matter what we're talking about, is think big, get excited about the possibilities, start small. So if you are an educator who's fully bought into universal design for learning, you don't have to convince people that designing for access and inclusion and all of these things are valuable, but how do you do it in a way that feels sustainable and meaningful in your current kind of class design, your curriculum? And so I would say if you're just kind of getting started with AI and your focus is, hey, I really want to universally design lessons and learning experiences, maybe the first thing you're doing is working with the AI to create construct specific options or choices, right? Really honoring student agency. But I think even giving students two meaningful choices for a lot of teachers, that's a lot cognitively to think about what's an equitable choice here. What are two choices that are going to target the same standard skill concept? And really, the more of those small wins where they're like, that's a great idea. Or, hey, I'm about to start a sequence of lessons. I want to design a pre-assessment activity. Going in and working with ChatGPT or Claude and saying, this is the standard we're going to focus on. I want to pre-assess my students. Can you as a curriculum designer and generate some, options that might appeal to different kinds of students so I can accurately assess what they already know or what they can do. Then you start to get all these small wins and then teachers get excited. And I think they're more apt to spend time working with AI to do other things.
Sometimes I feel like some of the folks I've talked to, it's like, hey, I'm supposed to have these boxes full, so I'm just going to use AI to fill the boxes, and then I'm just going to teach what I want to anyway. That's not what we want. For me, a lot of the standard stuff just hasn't generated the stuff that I want,
Right.
But it sounds like it's a process. So I know you have a framework. Can you give us kind of in a 30,000-foot view to help educators understand, okay, there is hope for me to know how to truly improve my lessons in a meaningful way? Because, the research I've seen basically says, hey, I can write a good lesson that maybe might help a beginning teacher. But once you get a little bit of experience on you, it just doesn't measure up.
Yeah. So in elevating educational design, there are layers to the design framework that we walk teachers through, which is you can use, here's how you use AI to backward design a unit, making sure that the desired result for learning is aligned with that assessment strategy. The next layer is how do we universally design with blended learning models, which is what my station rotation and UDL book really focuses on. But how do you design the lessons to proactively try to remove barriers? Then the next layer is, are we collecting data as students progress through a sequence of lessons? And how are we using that data to be responsive to student needs? Because as proactive as we're being to try to remove barriers and set them up for success, some kids are going to really leapfrog forward and need next level challenge to stay engaged. Some are going to need much more support and reteaching and scaffolding to make progress. And then the final tier down is really like, how do we also help to cultivate resilient learners who are strategic, flexible, and adaptable? As a teacher, you can bite off the whole thing if you want, if you're designing lessons or units from scratch, or if you're like, hey, I already have these lessons. Now I just really want to focus on the universal design, the blended learning, and that piece, and then being responsive to student needs. So
when you look at a UDL lesson plan and you're like, okay, I think they're missing the point, what are those mistakes that people can make that you're like, okay, I think you're not quite there yet in your thinking?
a mistake for sure is we're giving students a choice, but they're just kind of like random choices, right? They're not connected to the same. Like if we're going to give students flexible pathways through the learning experience by giving them a meaningful choice, that meaningful choice still should be helping learners to understand the same concepts or skills, right? They shouldn't just be like, well, they could do this random thing over here or this random thing over here? And so that construct specific choice is important. But I see a lot of teachers get stalled kind of at the, hey, I'm doing UDLs, I'm doing UDL, I'm creating choice boards. And it's like, okay, choice boards are a wonderful strategy, but are you also thinking about how to remove barriers when you provide tier one instruction? Do you know how to design a rotation that allows you to work with a small group to differentiate instruction and differentiate modeling sessions, kind of differentiate the supports, scaffolds, guidance, feedback you're giving to learners as they attempt to understand concepts and skills. It's some of that deeper work around how we're meeting specific students' needs. Also, I think there's this opportunity to really embrace co-construction. Like, are we inviting students into the process of designing aspects of their learning experience with us? And now that we have AI in, I would say, more and more classrooms, right? The schools are more open to it. I was an English teacher in a high school for 15 or 16 years. It's like, why does every kid need to write an argumentative essay on the same prompt? Why don't you design your own prompt with, AI? And then we can have a quick conference, make sure it's a solid prompt, and then boom, now you're writing something you're maybe more interested in. Or I want to assess, can you do this thing, or do you understand this? What's a way in which you want to propose you could demonstrate that understanding that would appeal to your strengths, your interests, your preferences? So, it's like there's UDL beyond the choice board. We want to be careful of making sure those choices are construct specific. And then where are those opportunities to kind of reimagine our instructional approach and strategies to really work directly with small groups and individual learners to meet their specific needs and co-construct learning experiences with?
How do we help people understand that, yeah, AI is a tool, but let's understand that teachers are valuable and needed?
I think for me, the biggest disconnect here is that when people outside of education, and even a lot of people, Vicki, in education, when they close their minds, and they're like picturing a classroom and a teacher, what is that person doing? They're standing at the front of the room. They are transferring information. They are orchestrating the parts of a whole group lesson. In this day and age, I am constantly challenging educators and school leaders to say, if information is all around us and AI can generate quick explanations of complex concepts and things immediately, we have to be checking in with ourselves about what is the true value of a teacher. In my mind, it's two-part. They are architect of learning experiences because they know the population they're designing for. And so many teachers don't see themselves that way, which I think is a shame because it's such an important piece of this puzzle. AI can do all those things, and we still think our value is being the expert at the front of the room. Then it makes sense why people think, oh, an AI could take over our jobs or whatever. But if we start to really acknowledge that we are architects and then we are facilitators, and in that role as facilitators, we are working side by side with students, leaning into this human work that AI can't do, listening, observing, organically responding to students' needs, being compassionate, building relationships. We know relationships are absolutely pivotal to students' learning. So are they going to create a relationship like they would have with a teacher with an AI? No, but it's all about perception of what is our value. And I think outside of education, there is this misconception that teachers are just the experts. And even inside education, changing that perception is so incredibly hard in some spaces.
Have to relate to educate. Well, Dr. Catlin Tucker, it's just been too long. We'd highly recommend her books. 2 books in 2025, Elevating Educational Design with AI and the Station Rotation Model in UDL. Catlin, what do you think is the best way for people to get in touch with you?
My website, catlintucker.com, is kind of a one-stop shop. I blog every week, school leader focused, and then all my books and my other offerings are easily accessible there as well.
Thank you for coming on the show, Dr. Catlin Tucker.
Thank you for having me, Vicki. It was a pleasure.
Today's sponsor is Clixo, an award-winning magnetic play toy that turns 2D shapes into endless 3D possibilities. I recently took Clixo to my classroom. A few students started playing, and then eventually the whole class was on that side of the room, designing, making crowns with propellers, sea animals, and anything they could dream up. Clixo is a magnetic play system, and it has flexible pieces that make it simple for students or kids at home to build, explore, and collaborate in the classroom, on a field trip, or at home. I love the design challenges that come in the box, but it did not take long for my students to be creating designs of their own. We tested the Creator Pack, which is full of ball bearings to let them add cute spinning things to their creation. We also tested marine marvels with amazing sea creatures and the tiny and mighty space that was easy for travel. And it's super easy to clean up. I highly recommend the Clixo for elementary centers. Makerspaces for elementary through high school is amazing no-screen activities for kids at home or traveling. These will make great holiday presents. So check them out at Clixo.com/pages/Target. I highly recommend Clixo as a great holiday present or for your makerspace or center. Check out Clixo. Thanks for tuning in to the 10-Minute Teacher Podcast. Watch the video version of this podcast and catch my new radio and TV show, Cool Cat Teacher Talk, on YouTube and a radio or TV station near you. Join my Cool Cat Teacher Classroom Matters newsletter at coolcatteacher.com/newsletter. Leave a review if you found this helpful. See you later, educator.